Hi there and welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth. My name's Anna Pirelli. The comments that you see here are my views, beliefs, opinions, and sometimes they are not even my fully formed views, beliefs, and opinions. However, they are my understandings. Please do retain an open mind and reflect on any of the content and your comfort levels. If your views differ, please feel free to leave a comment. Also remember, it is possible to disagree in respectful ways. My way is not necessarily your way and vice versa. You might also find that some of the content on this playlist in regard to spiritual or universal laws, it resonates with you, meaning it feels right to you, while other laws may not feel right or they may not feel comfortable. If this is the case, the information is either not right for you or it is not right for you right now, and it might never be right for you at any given time. It really doesn't matter. As an earthy and practical person, I can put my hand up with all honesty and say that I have at different times had the same feelings about some of the content in here. And with some of them, I still have a level of skepticism within my viewpoints, but I choose to retain an open mind about the things that I don't fully understand for a few reasons. Firstly, because I believe it would be supreme arrogance to think that we all know all of the answers while we have a body. And because what is right for one of us is not necessarily right or suitable for all of us, and I choose to respect the differences. Please do leave your opinions, beliefs. Feel free to argue the points in a respectful way with any of the content on the slides and even my interpretations. And if you feel that you can add clarity around some of the content, we would all love to see it. Thank you. For now, though, let's explore the laws.
All creation is governed by law. The principles that operate in the outer universe, discoverable by scientists, are called natural laws. But there are subtler laws that rule the hidden spiritual planes and the inner realm of consciousness. Contained within these laws, or conditions, is the true nature of matter. Knowledge of these laws has an effect upon the mental urges. Mind is the builder. Stay in full mindfulness of the application of universal law as related to self and to others, and know that in love all life is given, in love all things move. In giving one attains, in giving one acquires. In giving, love becomes the fulfillment of desire, guided and directed in the ways that bring the more perfect knowledge of self as related to the universal, all-powerful, all-guiding, all divine influence in life. Love is life. When we go back, merge with the God source, in some infinitesimal but profound way, we expand the mind of God. Our higher self always points the best and most perfect way, and it is ours to listen and choose or reject what we hear. It does not blame, but patiently tries again to show the perfect way, the loving way. All of creation pushes forth. We are ever becoming. Identity ever remains. Universal Law number 60, the Law of No Judgement. The universal spirit does not judge us. Judgments are human inventions, a means to compare, contrast, and control as we judge ourselves against artificial and often idealistic standards of perfection, morality, or truth. Under the law of equalities, our judgments attract judgment to us in equal measure. The life review, also known as the karmic review conducted by yourself after death, is a condition of living in duality, that is, the third dimension.
So once again, I think this law is self-explanatory, but just in case the people that are listening or watching and they've got English as a second language, judgment by definition has two meanings. Within the context of this video, I'm going to use the meaning that refers to divinity, which is a misfortune or calamity viewed as a divine punishment. So that leads me to interpret this law as saying that divine punishments such as banishing a person to hell are figments of the human condition. This doesn't mean, of course, that we don't receive consequences to our actions or poor decisions or lack of self-control. We still get consequences. From a psychological perspective, I get the point that humans have this innate ability to compare or judge themselves based on their own personal standards of morality, and that is that we see right and wrong in other people's actions or even our own, and we're often so idealistic in our standards. I was going to say high standards, because that quite often is the case, that it's unreal to expect that person or even ourselves to be the perfect person that we envisage in our imagination. Now, a prime example of this is, relating it to myself. When I was young, I absolutely loved reading books and I loved children. Two factors here. And in my head, I had this image that one day I would grow up, I would have a swag of children because, of course, I love children, and I would be the perfect mother, like the mother in Little Women, if you don't mind. One of my friends who knows me, I told her this story years ago, and she laughed her head off. She went, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "Yes, really." Always patient, always kind, continuously loving, never a bad word to say about anyone or anything, endless patience with her children, combined, these attributes that I saw in the mother in Little Women with the head character of Jo, who had a little bit of a spark about her, a little bit of the rascal, if you like. She liked to be adventurous and that kind of stuff. And, I identified with that. So in my imagination, I saw myself, actually, just to put it in perspective, Jo grew up to not be able to have children herself, but she ended up with the swag of adopted boys running an orphanage or something like that. So based on my moral values, I saw her as being a very good person and a role model. And so because I liked the character as well, in my imagination when I was young, I saw myself as being this combination of Jo and her mother. And then once I became a mother myself, this was combined with that whole upbringing based on the church as well, Christianity, Catholicism, that kind of stuff. I fell far short of my vision, shall we say, and I used to beat myself up relentlessly for what I considered to be my failings and inadequacies as a human, as a mother, and as a person in general. And this is because I was measuring myself against a fiction, okay? And many of us will do this kind of thing. I mean, the best example of people measuring themselves by a fictitious standard is obviously seen across society now when people are doing this whole plastic surgery and enhancements, because they're no longer measuring beauty by natural standards. They're measuring and comparing themselves to other people that have been artificially enhanced. And quite often, and I speculate, no disrespect to transgender women here, but they can be very beautiful. They have beautifully manufactured breasts and lips and curves, and especially some of these younger ones. And so they are, to a large extent, a fabrication of a woman because they are designed in the image of the surgeon's idea of perfection of what a woman is. And a real naturally born woman doesn't have that same perfect symmetry. And, I want to point out here, it's not just the transgender women, of course, that are getting these surgical enhancements or the lip fillers and the Botox and all the rest of it. It's across genders these days. Men and women are trying to achieve this ideal that is not real. It's not based on any form of reality. And the reason that they're getting it done is because they're not accepting themselves or loving themselves in the purity of the divine design, if you like. I'm not saying that we shouldn't enhance ourselves if we want to. I mean, everybody's situation is different, but I think the idea is there's a big difference between being completely plastic fantastic and having an enhancement. And it's not just about trying to measure up against fake models or whatever. We live in a world now where those people that are of celebrity status, they're all getting, I don't even think enhancement is the right word, but they're certainly setting up this unreal image for the majority of us to work towards, and people are becoming obsessed with these images. Now, I can tell you that I realised many, many years ago, because I worked for a newspaper at a point in time, that back then everybody was always obsessed with being this idea of what a beautiful woman looks like. But they also were measuring themselves against artificial imagery as well, because the photographs of models, very few of them, and I'm talking about the models here, were so beautiful that the images didn't need to be touched up. But what they used to do back in the old days was they would do airbrushing and use filters and that kind of stuff to hide wrinkles or skin flaws and defections. Of course, there were occasionally a model who was so photogenic that she didn't need to have her photo touched up. I'm saying she, but it could be guys as well. But I can also say that what I observed too was that some of these women that looked fabulous in a photograph actually weren't that pretty in real life. It's just they photographed really well. So that's what they used to say. People were photogenic. I look forward to the day when people can become comfortable in their own skin again and see the beauty of who they are. That doesn't mean that they think they're better than anybody else or anything like that, but they can look in the mirror and be really comfortable. And if one lip's a bit imperfect or whatever, I think there's a poem that says, I am a perfect imperfection. And to hold and adopt that attitude, to realise that beauty isn't perfect. Beauty is beauty, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You know, this whole idea of perfection is unreal, actually. And I think that's what this law is trying to say. Stop measuring yourself against other people's yardsticks, you know. Beauty also is different in different areas or places and countries, you know. In Australia, we have or when I was growing up, it was like if you had blonde hair and blue eyes, you were somehow more attractive than the rest of the population, because there weren't as many blondes here, I guess, back in the day, and everybody looked to, you know, have that Viking look or whatever, you know, and with people dyeing their hair blonde. I mean, there's still an element of that. But I did have a conversation with a Swedish lady many years ago. She was dark-haired, and I wouldn't have thought by my values that she was a particularly strikingly attractive woman. However, she did say to me that back home in Sweden, which is where she was from, brunettes are considered to be really beautiful. Automatically, there is this assumption that if they've got brown hair, it makes them attractive, a bit like the blonde aspect here in Australia. So it's, beauty is just variable wherever you go as well. Now, truth, of course, is once again that's variable. It's based on, let me think about how I'm going to approach this one. So truth can be variable, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's not based on our opinions or our feelings. Truth is based on facts, right? If it's a personal truth, then it's a matter of you can believe what you want, but I don't have to believe what you believe until somebody proves to me that it's absolutely is or absolutely is not a categoric truth. Basically, it's not supported by factual evidence. Anyway, our truths inform our personal morality, our core values, and this is generally what most of us will judge another person by, whether their behaviour or looks meet our ideas of what is right or wrong or good or bad. So I've decided to unpack this a little bit more by going back to the dictionary and grabbing some interpretations. So truth actually does have a few meanings. It's a fact or a belief that is accepted as true. That which is true, this is the second meaning, or in accordance with a fact or with fact or reality. And then the other one is the quality of or state of being true. So within the context of truth, there actually is no room for a personal truth. There is only room for truth that is based upon facts and grounded reality. However, I think it's also very important to understand that even scientific fact, or even the things that we call truths based on this definition with facts, is one that is variable. It can change, and this is because when we're talking about scientific facts or truths, there's always research occurring that may create a new truth. So what this means is what was a fact yesterday or a truth may not be true tomorrow. What's a fact today or what is true today may not be true tomorrow. And this is based on science, okay? And this is why there's so much confusion around a lot of the things we are advised to do, certainly of a medical nature, right? And I learned this many years ago because I had the 3 children, of course, and each time I gave birth, there was new evidence about how to approach SIDS, which actually was called cot death back then. So by the time I had the firstborn, I can't remember which ones it was, but it was a case of, when you put your baby to bed, don't lie it on its stomach because that increases the risk of them dying of cot death. I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, I'll be a good mum. I won't put my baby on its tummy. And then you have the next baby and they're like, oh, no, that science has been disproved now. Now they believe that if you lie your child on its back, right? So this is the kind of thing. So what I know is by the time I had my 3rd child, it had actually changed 3 times in the course of a year as to what was considered to be the high risk factors based on the research and evidence. So in the end, I just did, if the baby's happy and sleeping, let it be. So if we want to go into the idea of personal truths, what we're talking about with a personal truth is this is our core values, our morality. And it's a sense of what is right or wrong, as opposed to, my witness of the events. I'm just thinking actually of some of the stuff we see in the news. Well, this is my personal truth. Well, it might be your personal truth, but it doesn't make it true. When, for example, you get witnesses at an accident or whatever, they know that everybody's personal truth, what they observe, is not going to be the same. Very rarely can they get the witness statements to actually match up. And this is why it's so hard to actually put cases before the court. And my understanding, it impacts on the capacity to get justice in certain situations because witnesses to situations have so many variations. And when I was doing my studies, they gave us an example of a case. I think it had about 20 witnesses to it. And when they interviewed each witness, they couldn't even get a consensus on what colour shirt the perpetrator was wearing. This is an example of how it works. But anyway, so personal truths, they are our values. They're based on what is right and wrong. It's not a witness statement. It's not a testimony. It's an internal feeling. And it's how we personally evaluate what is right and wrong or good and bad behaviour. Now, even this becomes a grey area because, our values and our morals are based on our experiences, our environment, and our personal ethos, and I guess largely as well upon our education and understanding, And a prime example of a contentious issue, and hopefully is not one that's inflammatory at this point in time, could be the debate about mining of uranium, for example, for use in nuclear power plants, right? Because this has been an ongoing debate for about the last 40 years that I'm aware of. Some people see them as a really good thing and beneficial for the environment. Other people see them as a huge hazard. They shouldn't be getting constructed at all. And we shouldn't allow uranium mining to occur because uranium might get into the wrong hands and be used to create nuclear weapons of war. And all parties that are involved in this debate are quite passionate about it because their passion is driven because of their belief system and their values. Now, another interesting thing, so I'm going to move on from this because these are all valid examples of how our morality can be somewhat misguided, and why I believe that when it comes to our personal truths, they are for us. They're not for us to impose on other people because they are based on our experiences, our cultural needs, or whatever. Anyway, I'll tell you another story about when I was at uni and they were measuring intellectual intelligence. Did you hear this? I wasn't sure whether or not to start or not because I'd put pause on the button. Okay, so what we were looking at university was the validity of some of the research that's conducted in a social setting, and that doing tests on children for intellectual capacity was actually unfair and unreasonable to certain people, certain demographics. So they cited a case where there was a group of Indigenous people, and if I recall correctly, they were living in South America, and they were in a jungle setting, I believe, and they had performed very poorly in, I can't remember the name of the test that's used by the education system in the Western world, but it basically assesses a person's capacity to learn. And anyway, it was determined based on these assessments that the group in South America were under-intelligent, and it was really very harsh. I think it was done in about the 1950s. And the argument was that what the people doing the research had failed to take into account was what was important to the demographic that they were doing the assessment on. These people lived in an environment where they had no need for literacy. It had no value to their lives, and no relevance. So for them, what was important was not whether or not a child could read and write. What was important was, can they make tools to feed themselves? Can they catch fish? Can they climb? Are they agile? All sorts of things that are relevant to the way they live their lives, and literacy wasn't part of it. They didn't value literacy. So this is the important thing. So if you're going to do assessments, you've got to ensure that what you're assessing on has meaning and value to the people. So it wasn't actually that these young Indigenous children were not clever. They just had no interest in it. They had more important things that had greater meaning and value to them than the assessments. So anyway, going back to it, obviously when we speak about morality, these are our core personal values of right and wrong. And when we judge others based on our belief system, then there is a risk of extreme harm being done to innocent people just because they believe different things to us. They have a different personal truth. This is what we're going on. And the problem with the ideas of right and wrong is that when we get self-righteous, we can actually justify being really cruel because it was the right thing for us to do. You got to ask the questions, who was it right for? For them or for you that you were cruel, right? So Albert Bandura, learned about him at uni as well. He wrote a paper on the theory of moral disengagement, and in this he offers the explanation, which I've given above, on why good people can be so callous and cruel to other people, and it's because they feel right to do so. And the problems with this is there becomes this massive social divide, and you will all have seen it, where tempers and passions flare as one group attempts to force the other group to live by their standards. Now, if we want to look a little bit closer in the Western context, take a look at the witch hunts as a prime example of justifying really abhorrent human behaviour because a person feels right. These people were good churchgoers, Christian people, who for their own reasons thought it was okay and right to throw women into rivers with rocks tied to them just to see if they could float or sink, to burn them at stakes. They also lived at a time when they were torturing people, and these people considered themselves to be godly disciples of Jesus, yet nothing about the torture or their behaviours was Christ-like or Christian when push comes to shove. This goes against all the church teachings as far as I'm aware, but yet it still happened because people felt they were right to do it. I do, of course, understand the point about judgment attracting judgment, okay? Because to me, all you've got to do is think about this logically and rationally. When we judge another person, especially if we judge them as inadequate, we actually invite scrutiny of ourselves, with this finger pointing when we say they did, People turn around, the automatic reflexive thing is to turn around and look at the person that's doing the finger pointing and ask, well, how do you live by your standards? You know what I mean? They might be right with what they say. They might be right in pointing out somebody's failings. But at the same time, it's like, well, are you living up to your own expectations? So we scrutinise them back. Now, if we're at the end of the finger point, the automatic thing is that we scrutinise very deeply, and then we start to see the hypocrisy of a person, and we start judging them back, even if we're not verbalising it. And I say this even as a person who understands that, to try not to be judgmental. I say try because I'm human. I judge people. I try not to, but sometimes I can't help it, especially if they're judging me. And then I find myself looking back at them and doing the same thing of, well, how do you live by your own standards? And then the other thing is, well, who are you to judge me when you're not perfect yourself? There becomes this whole internal dialogue that goes on, even if it's not verbalized. And then if the judgments are particularly harsh and come with accusations and allegations, the nature of humanity is that we will go and talk to somebody about it, especially if we've got a friend. We'll have a chat and say, so-and-so said, what do you think, right? And your friend might turn around and say, well, I know so-and-so, and so-and-so is not a nice person. You know what I mean? It then goes down this whole rabbit warren. So if you don't want to be judged, don't judge other people. That is the clear thing. Because everything has karma, doesn't it? What we do, what we say, it all comes back to us as a consequence to our actions. And if people are continually judging other people harshly or inadequately and all the rest of it, at the very least, they're going to find themselves isolated and alone. Perhaps might take quite a few years for that to happen, but they will reap the consequences to their actions. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that we can't look at a person and make decisions for ourselves using discernment. I think discernment is different to judgment, and I've written some notes here because I think when we judge, we're judging people as inadequate. When we're being discerning, we're looking at actions and behaviours and saying, I don't like that action or behaviour, I don't think that's very nice. So we can make healthier choices for ourselves as to where we want to devote our energy and time. I'm going to refer to narcissism within the context of judgment, actually, because obviously it's all over social media. It's kind of like the latest catchword, oh my goodness me, they say that person's a narcissist, that person's a narcissist. And a lot of really restrictive beliefs placed upon a person. Now, when these people start pointing the finger, if they actually took the time, I've got to the point now where I see it and I've just scanned past it a lot of the time. But if they actually took a really good look, right? In the first instance, narcissism is actually a behavioural disorder. And behavioural disorders can be healed, right? Because you're talking about learned pathways of behaviour, neural pathways if you're into neuroscience. What I keep seeing over the internet is that it's incurable and these people can never recover. Well, I disagree with that. I see that as people placing their beliefs and limitations on another person. It might take work, yeah, sure. They might have a couple of slipbacks, yeah, sure. That's what happens when people are on their recovery journey, whether they've got anxiety, depression, or anything else. When they are attempting to build new behaviours and new neural pathways, new ways of thinking and all the rest of it, they do have slipbacks from time to time. But where am I going with this? I'm now at the point where I see people going, doing the finger point of narcissist, and I think, are you one? Because you're seeing it so much, I realise that it's hard because when people do experience narcissistic abuse, it is so deep and so painful and so hurtful, and it's actually really quite vindictive. But there is a big but to this. What many people don't realise, I don't think they realise, is most of us at some point in our lives will display narcissistic tendencies. I've speculated with this with quite a few people actually, that there is an element of this because some people mature and some don't. But I think the defining point of narcissism is the vindictiveness. Anyway, where am I going with this? Oh, I know where I'm going with it. I'll try and speed it up. Okay, yes, where I'm going with this is I do believe people can be cured of it. And the thing is, we can't change them. They have to come to that desire themselves to want to change it. And they don't often see what they're doing to other people because they're so self-absorbed, shall we say. But I do know of one case where a person has managed to recover or commence their recovery journey with the support of family. At the same time, it involves the life review that is mentioned here. And the life review, I'll talk about that. I'm not sure about it being a condition of duality of living in the third dimension. I do recall reading or being told once upon a time about the life review, and that was once I'd started doing Reiki and healing, okay, that it was possible to send healing of a life review to people under grace and in the divine way, and that we would all be wise to send one to ourselves on a regular basis, so that when the time of transition occurs, that is when we die, if we want to use mainstream words, the process of transition would be easier, because I just want to check my notes here. Okay, yeah, just making sure I'm at the right place. The process of shifting out of the body and into the spirit state involves a review of our life anyway, okay? And it involves experiencing, you're going to go, what a load of baloney. Hear me out on this one, because this one's quite interesting. And because I can actually tell a story that I personally know occurred. Okay, so anyway, it involves them having the emotional experiences across their life path. So if a person has primarily brought joy to people throughout their life, their passing will be relatively easy, because as they go through that transition, they're going to be able to see and feel the love, revisit the love that they gave to other people. They get to feel that returned. If they've created hell on earth for people and misery and sorrow across the life path, they get to actually experience that pain and suffering on an emotional level that they gave to others. Now, this, of course, is my belief and understanding. You may believe differently. Anyway, there's reasons why I believe it. Okay, so what I understand, the lady whose husband was a narcissist who changed his ways, he had a near-death experience, and he experienced the life review. And when he became conscious, he actually decided that he wanted to do something about it and make amends for all the stuff that he'd done. Now, this is the whole point of having a life review, by the way, is we get an opportunity to at least apologise or to try and make good for whatever we may have done that caused harm and hurt to another person before we pass over. Now, going back to the scenario of me being told about this process, I wasn't sure if I believed in it. I just decided I would have an open mind, and I was doing distance healing. So long story short, my ex-husband at the time was giving us a heap of grief towards myself and my children, like really big time. And I remember at the end of the healing tacking on a life review under grace in the divine way, and if appropriate, you know what I mean, not forcing my will. And I remember putting it out there, if you think it's appropriate to give it to my ex-husband, yes, please, thank you very much. And that was the end of it. I expected nothing, because to me, I was just doing a healing, and whatever happens, happens. So imagine my surprise the next day when I get a phone call from him, and he is bawling his eyes out. Now, I hadn't spoken to him for months. He was being absolutely horrendous, but he was crying his eyes out down the phone, saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Now, because I'd sent the healing and detached from her, I'd forgotten I'd done it. And all I could think was, oh my God, he's dying. He's been diagnosed with cancer. This is the only reason I can think why he would be crying so much like he is. And then I've managed to interrupt and say, "Are you okay? Have you had bad medical news or something? Are you dying?" I said to him. And he said, "I think I might be." I said, "Why would you think that you might be?" He said, "Well, last night when I was sleeping," he said, "I had dream after dream after dream." And he said, "It was like my whole life was passing before my eyes." He said, "And I realise now how much pain and grief that I've put upon you and the kids. And, I want to change. I want to, all this stuff that blew my..." Anyway, obviously it was beholden on me to turn around and say, "Look, I'm really sorry that it was so bad for you. I didn't realise." You know what I mean? This was a new experience for me. And anyway, within that, where I'm going with this, what is actually completely disappointing is he did have all of this experience, and we did have that conversation, and for about 2 weeks it was good, and then he reverted to type again. And it never became good after that, I might add. He continued to have these negative patterns of behaviour actually for the rest of his life, to be honest. He's still living, but I don't think he's ever learned from those experiences. So that was a learning curve for me as well, is that we can do all of these things, But even still, we've got choices within that, you know. You can show, there's that old saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I might just leave you with that one, and just the final comments that, you know, all I can think of to say about this particular law is it's not what I had expected to see in the first instance. You know, when we talk about the law of no judgment, I'd expected to see something like passages of, by the measure you judge others, you shall be judged, or if there's one judge only and that's the creator. But really, they are saying that we are creators of our own destiny, we are creators of our own karma, and we have choices, you know. I think I probably could go on about this, but I think the video is long enough. So I'm going to leave you to come back and give me your thoughts and comments. Let me know what you feel, what you might add. Have a good day. Have a blessed day. Take care. Speak to you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.